Hey Artnerds, so a while back Paul Ruben sent me their floral watercolor palette to share with you guys. That video has already been released. I'm going to link it in the cards and in the description if you're curious. And in that video, I did a field test that was entirely flowers. It was a bouquet of Louisiana native flowers. And I decided that I wanted to see how well this palette worked for painting people. So yeah, I'm still painting flowers, a lot of the same flowers as in that other illustration, but also a little bit of people here too, because for me and the kind of stuff I paint, which is like watercolor comics and watercolor illustrations, so a lot of people, a lot of plants, a lot of animals, I felt like this palette might be a really good fit for the kind of work that I like to do, so I wanted to put it through its paces. So I have the line art for this illustration if you would like to print it out and color along. I have that over on my Patreon at patreon.com/natosoup if you enjoy coloring or if you like working with other people's line arts. I have an entire collection of printable line arts over there that my patrons have infinite access to. Once you're a patron, you have access to pretty much everything that I share over there. So I do have that up, but I am going to be using the floral palette that you guys see here to paint this watercolor illustration. And if you're curious to learn more about this palette, make sure you check out the first video, but I will kind of talk about it a little bit here. So it is a 24 color palette that has been specially selected for florals. So it has some really nice and kind of unusual colors in it, like the opera rose that you guys see here. There's also some lavenders and some cobalts, as well as a cobalt turquoise. So some really bright, fun colors. If you're an illustrator who is attracted to really bright, vibrant, saturated colors, this palette might be a good pick for you. Now, I have worked with Paul Ruben's watercolors a lot over the years. I've reviewed several of their palettes, both ones that they've sent to me, but also many, many, many that I have paid for myself. And in general, I feel that they make a very high quality watercolor product that is priced in a way that is very accessible for people who are on a budget. So if you are interested in watercolor, whether you're just getting started or you've been painting for a while, I generally highly recommend Paul Ruben's products. I think they're pretty dang good watercolors. They don't require a whole lot of pre-activation. They activate very readily, and you get a lot of color basically immediately. So what I did is I started with a toning wash, focusing mainly on opera rose using large, fluffy, flat brushes. This is a hake brush here, but I'm also working in some of the yellows, some ultramarine blue for its beautiful granulation, as well as the cobalt turquoise, and then that really bright green that you see over there. And then I also have a little bit of kind of a darker red to work in there as well. I am working on Arch's cold press cotton rag watercolor paper. I think it's the 120 pound. It has already been stretched, and this illustration was originally sketched digitally in Procreate, and then I printed it out on Arches and I inked it using a Sakura Pigma FB. If you guys are ever interested in how I get my digital sketches onto watercolor paper, I'd be happy to kind of walk you guys through that process. I also talk about that process somewhat in some of my older videos, but some things have changed, so I would be happy to kind of go back over that with you guys. I was able to do some very gentle washes. I'm sorry that my arm is kind of blocking this, but using the flat hake brush after the initial layer had dried, I'm able to go back in and kind of layer my washes. And with Paul Ruben's, you get this really nice kind of subtle, like a misty effect with their wet into wet that I really like. Their watercolors really diffuse out quite nicely. And that's a quality that I happen to like. Not every watercolor artist is looking for the exact same thing. There's going to be times that I hate a watercolor that you guys love and vice versa. And it's just because we paint very differently and we have very different needs. I am not a fine artist. I am a commercial artist. I paint comics and I paint illustrations and I sell art prints and I sell greeting cards. So, you know, my goals for watercolor might be different from yours, but hopefully I'll have some valid information to share. So I really love how this like underwash with splatter effects turned out. I really love how the opera rose and the ultramarine blue play together. I really love those kind of color, those really bright colors and how they mix together and the kind of granulation that we get. I am somebody who is a fan of granulation. That is a quality that in general I'm looking for, especially with ultramarine blue. And in general, I'm quite pleased with how Paul Ruben's ultramarine blues handle. So I allowed these washes to dry out totally and completely. This is a little hyperlapse video just to kind of show how it dries, and so we can see whether or not there are any shifts in colors as it dries. I do find that Paul Ruben's tends to dry fairly saturated. We don't lose all the color. Over my 15 years of painting with watercolor and my 10 years of reviewing watercolors, I have reviewed a lot of watercolors. And not every brand is made equal, and some of the student grade brands just kind of fall apart, but that's not really the case with Paul Ruben's. And I also want to point out that this video that I'm sharing here was not part of the first video. This is something I did of my own volition, of my own curiosity. All opinions are my own based on my experiences with using Paul Ruben's and doing several illustrations using Paul Ruben's watercolors. So while it might sound like a shill, and I appreciate this, this was my own choice. They didn't ask me to do this video. I chose to do this video, and I really just want to be able to share a fairly affordable watercolor product with people who might be interested, or if they're on the fence, or if they're not sure if Paul Ruben's is going to be a good fit for them, because it's a brand that, like, it's becoming more popular, but let's say it's not as popular as, say, Winsor & Newton or Sennelier or some of the brands that have been around in the US for a really long time. So another thing that I like about Paul Ruben's is that I'm actually able to do, in fact, I'll admit it when we get to the end, I overworked this piece. It went further than I wanted it to. It lost a lot of its freshness, but that's not on the paint. That's on me and just me overthinking things and overworking things. So hopefully you can tell from like the video and the time lapse and the process itself how these paints handle. Please don't necessarily judge how overworked the final piece turned out. Don't judge that against these watercolors. That was just kind of on me. I really wanted to create a really colorful, dark underwash inspired by when I reviewed Maymery blue watercolors. I did, this is actually a companion piece to the field test that I did for my Maymery blue review, which is like a smiling girl with blonde hair surrounded by wildflowers, and like she's excited to see whoever she's looking up at. So this girl is more trepidatious at whoever she is looking up at, like she's been found. I draw a lot of tiny people art, a lot of Lilliputian or borrowers inspired art, if you will. So I love playing around in that world and playing around with different themes and how tiny people might react to humans. So this is kind of a more cautious companion piece to that other one. I'm also going to go in and I'm adding in like little stripy marks with Opera Rose and that red violet, that I forgot the color of that, but that reddish violet and a little bit of the yellow. And I'm just playing around and having fun, kind of messing around with it. And I mean, I really spent a lot of time on the underpainting here. There's a lot of layers here. And I actually really liked how the underpainting turned out. So one of the things I've started to do, because I do sometimes have a tendency, I like to mess around and find out when it comes to watercolor, and sometimes that turns out great and sometimes that turns out poorly. So one of the things I've started doing is I've started scanning when I like an interim stage. In that way, if I like that better than the final piece, I can use that for cards and prints as opposed to that final piece. So once all these layers had a chance to dry out fully, I created a Grisaille wash with indigo, which might have overly flattened some of the beautiful color mixes. But part of the reason for doing a Grisaille like this is you see right now there's like a visual, everything's kind of messy, everything's kind of saturated. It's kind of hard to tell one thing from another. And doing an underpainting in a monochrome like a Grisaille or a Blueyer in this instance, because it's indigo, kind of helps create some depth. It creates some shadow. It allows us to differentiate between the different layers. It gives us a foreground, a background, and a middle ground. It helps us make the little character there pop out a little bit more. So even if it did kind of flatten out some of these beautiful colors, it does make it a little bit easier to paint further on. I didn't want to go too heavy with the Grisaille. Sometimes when I'm doing a Grisaille, I will basically do an entire monochrome painting in Grisaille and then add local color on top of that. I didn't want to go that far with this. I just wanted to use it to help me kind of tell what I'm doing and make it easier for me to see and for you guys to see. So I am experimenting a little bit with this field test, but mostly playing and having fun and trying things out and seeing how I like them, rather than, trying to do too much with it. I did do too much with it, but sometimes I will get a wild hair and just try to push something as far as I can push it to see if I can get away with it, to see if I can make it work. And sometimes I will do just a very straightforward illustration, very in my comfort zone. Like a lot of my Louisiana food illustrations are very straightforward for what they are, and that's intentional. And then, sometimes I'll try to push the envelope with lighting effects or with how I do my toning washes or how I'm handling my Grisaille or some of my color choices, because I'm always trying to grow as an artist. I might not be a fine artist, but I'm always trying to hone my skills and learn new things and trying to share those with you guys, trying to share that journey and that growth with y'all. It's been a long process, and I'm not ashamed to share my older art. It's still up, and how awful I was, because that is part of growing as an artist. And I'm sure in 10 years, I'll look back at some of the things I did now and think about how I would make such different choices. So the flowers I chose for this illustration are, when I say like they're in Louisiana, it doesn't mean they're all native. So I have a background in earth environmental science, and my focus was on invasives. So I try to always be careful when I'm talking about like native plants versus non-native plants. So the evening primrose and the asters, the little purple asters, those are native. I think there's cinquefoil in this illustration as well. That's also native. But chicory, which is the blue, they will be blue flowers. They're in the aster family. Chicory is not actually native. It was introduced down here. It is actually, we use it in our coffee. If you've ever been to like Cafe Du Monde, they add chicory to the coffee. It's a bittering agent, and it was used during the Depression and honestly during the Civil War to stretch out coffee so that it seemed like you had more, it tasted like you had more, but not necessarily. And I actually have a pet rat. I have two pet rats right now. We recently adopted brothers, and one of them's named Filet and the other's name is Chicory. And this illustration was done before we adopted Chicory. Basil was still alive when I was working on this illustration. He passed away at 3 years, 8 months, and there's still a hole in my heart where I miss him greatly, but he was my first rat and my heart rat. But I like chicory flowers. I think they're very pretty. So I had already kind of decided that if we ever adopted rats again, I would name one Chicory. So we have Chicory, who's actually this more scaredy cat, skittish one. And we have Filet, who I call my little spicy filet gumbo. He's the braver of the two, more willing to take a chance and interact with us. like how the Grisaille on this turned out, and I think I also scanned it at this stage too, where we have like that beautiful underwash that's adding a lot of color and vibrancy, but we also have that kind of Grisaille to kind of pull things together and make them easy to understand. So Paul Ruben's watercolors layer very beautifully. For the most part, they're fairly translucent, even in a palette like this where we do have some more opaque colors. So you have some flexibility in how you build up your colors, and they also mix beautifully. I was able to achieve all of the color mixes that I wanted throughout this painting. And I have to bring that up because, again, as someone who's reviewed so many watercolors, you guys, if you watch the channel, you know how many do not mix very well, how many mix into mud, how many fall apart when you add water. But if you don't watch the channel, a lot of less expensive watercolors, and even sometimes more expensive watercolors, are just not very well suited for the kind of art and illustration that I like to do. And sometimes people take that as fighting words, like I'm picking a fight with them personally because it's their favorite watercolor that works for what they like to do. But when I'm reviewing watercolors, and that's actually why I went back and did this field test here, I'm looking at it from a very specific viewpoint. While I always hope that my reviews help a variety of artists or are just interesting to a variety of artists, because I love watching other artists, especially artists who work differently than I do. I like watching how they work. I like watching how their work comes together. I am reviewing watercolors from the lens of somebody who paints a lot of people, somebody who has a cartoony art style, somebody who paints comics. So I have a very unique viewpoint when it comes to watercolor, informed by my master's in fine art in comics and in sequential art. So the qualities that I'm looking for in watercolor might be different. I might hold things to a different standard than another artist might. And that is not a reflection on them as an artist. That is not a reflection necessarily. I mean, it is a reflection on me as an artist and what I'm looking for and my viewpoints and how I like to handle paints and the kind of qualities that I need. But if we ever disagree on a paint, if I like something and you don't, or you like something and I don't, that is never an insult at you as an artist. That's not really me ever saying anything about you as an artist, because I'll be very blunt. We don't know each other. We've never met, actually. Maybe one day, and that would be cool. I love meeting other artists, but you know, it can't possibly be a statement about you because we've never met. And I hate that I have to bring this up, but anytime I review a watercolor that I don't like and that other people do, people get kind of bitey in the comments. And y'all are welcome to share your experiences with me, to share what you like about the watercolors, to gently and kindly point out maybe I missed something, or I'm handling it wrong, or I'm trying to get a color to do something that it just cannot do, or this brand formulates in a specific way and what I'm trying to get it to do isn't really what it's good at. You're always welcome to be cool and share your experiences in the comments. We all have room to grow. We all have room to learn. And, you know, I am forever going to be learning watercolor because I love watercolor and I'm always interested in learning more about watercolor. That's why I read books about watercolor and I watch other watercolor artists, and I love talking to other watercolor artists, and I buy art from other watercolor artists because there's always things I can learn. But sometimes people get really nasty in the comments, and I just want to, like, it's like a couple of videos, and I just want to point out, like, I'm just a woman in Southeast Louisiana who reviews art supplies for funsies on the internet. If you don't like my voice, if you don't like my art, if you don't like what I have to say, you can always click off from the video. I'm not going to know you did that. I'm not going to be hurt. I'm not going to be offended. You are not required to finish any of my videos. I feel like I have to point this out every time the politics in the US start getting particularly toxic, because it's just a trend that I've noticed over 2 Trump presidencies. So, you know, like, let's be kind to one another. Let's be cool. I try to keep my channel as like a place for people to enjoy art and to kind of rejuvenate themselves, and so that we can go out and exist another day. And to be able to do that, I have to have those reserves myself. So I don't expect this comment, people tend to be pretty chill in videos where I like the product. So I don't expect this video to be like that. And I might just be preaching to the choir here. Y'all might all be super cool, nice people. But, you know, it does pop up from time to time. And I do think it's something worth addressing. I know YouTube can be a toxic place, but there's no reason for it to have to be a toxic place. And certainly not in the art sphere. When I review products, when I review books or products, it is from the viewpoint of a reviewer. It is never a personal statement about anybody involved because I never know any of the people involved. So for this illustration, you guys saw while I was kind of going on about my, hey y'all, let's be kind to each other, shtick spiel, which I genuinely mean to the bottom of my heart. But, because most artists are super cool, nice people. Like there's no reason for us to be ugly to each other. But, you guys saw me paint the skin, very easy to mix, light skin tones. This set does have some darker, earth tones, darker neutrals, which can be useful for mixing skin tones. I'm not purporting to have the one and only way to mix a variety of skin tones, but I do have some videos where I demonstrate and walk you through how I mix skin tones. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I do have that in several of my playlists actually, because it's kind of a evergreen relevant topic. And if you guys are ever interested in me doing a follow-up tutorial on mixing skin tones to paint a variety of people, let me know. I would be happy to do that. No problems with the skin tones, no problems adding the blush. Now I'm just kind of adding in like local color for the flowers, including leaning heavily on Opera. I will point out, as you guys are well aware, Opera Rose is very fugitive. It is a dye-based color that is very prone to fading. It is so prone to fading that some watercolor brands have taken it out of their lineup entirely. I love Opera Rose. I paint for reproduction. While I do sell originals from time to time, I try to always disclose to my customers if there are fugitive colors in that illustration. And generally, I don't offer illustrations like the originals of illustrations that were painted with student grade watercolors where I can't guarantee that the paints will last for a while. But I sell art prints primarily, so that's not really going to be an issue. But I know that is something that a lot of artists do care about. So in that regard, this palette might have those kind of issues. I'll also be fair and say that when I review watercolors, I personally don't test for light fastness because I paint for reproduction. I paint comics, which are then printed in books or shared as a web comic. I paint illustrations that are then turned into art prints or stickers. So my art lives in a portfolio or it lives in archival boxes, and it's rarely on display. I do actually have my own art up in my own house, and I tend to spring for museum glass, just for me personally. I'm not saying you have to do that. My local art store, David's, one of my favorite places on earth, they have a frame shop, and they offer museum glass, and they sometimes give me a teacher's discount on framing. So, you know, it makes it more affordable to do so. But I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm saying I do put original watercolor illustrations generally in UV protective glass. Just knowing that paints can be fugitive and that not every artist understands or knows that they should be disclosing when the things they make are created with fugitive materials. Not everybody receives the same kind of background in art. And what I mean by that is some people don't have other artists for friends. They didn't do the con circuit. They don't have the opportunity to like share that kind of information and to learn by watching how other people do things. So they may just not know. And that's one of also the reasons I bring it up in these kind of videos is like that is something you should disclose to customers. If you're selling originals that were made with fugitive colors or dye-based colors or alcohol inks, just let them know that it might be fugitive and it can kind of sometimes affect your pricing. So I say that because there's so much Opera Rose in this illustration. And it was also a common mix color for me in this illustration. So if I were to sell the original for this, which I'd be open to doing so, it would be something that I would need to disclose. So you can kind of start to see how I ended up kind of overworking this piece, because like hindsight is 2020, and it's one of the beautiful things about narrating over my own time-lapse videos is I have a chance to self-critique, and I have a chance to see my mistakes, and I have a chance hopefully to learn from my mistakes. And I can already see like where I probably should have, like now I should have just focused on painting her hair and finishing it up, because this is a really beautiful stage to just call it. Or I could have even just left her hair as is and it still would have been really pretty. But sometimes I'll get into these headspaces where it has to look a certain way and it's not finished until it looks a certain way, which is why it's really wonderful to get up and take breaks and take breathers and get other people's opinion and feedback. Because if you're like me and you hyper-focus, like I do have ADHD, hi, hello, but I do hyper-focus, in art and watercolor in particular are some of my hyper-focuses. I use watercolor as a way to self-regulate. And people are like, Becca, how do you have the patience for watercolor? Well, I don't have the patience for color pencils. I don't have the patience for graphite rendering. I don't have the patience for oils. Watercolor just does something that's very calming and very satisfying for my brain. And you know, it's not going to be the same for every person. And it can be really helpful to find that medium that does what it like, does the good chemicals for your brain. That's one of the things I love about art in general, is it can be very calming and very regulating and very rewarding. But again, for me, it can also lead to a one-track mind where I will overwork things. And, you know, that's part of the learning and growing process, especially if I'm, believe it or not paying as much attention and I'm just kind of painting by rote. I can have a bad tendency of overworking things, of kind of killing the joy in a painting by working them too much. Now, that said, and I want to make it clear, that is not a reflection on Paul Ruben's watercolors. That is a reflection on me as an illustrator. I mixed up, I wanted her to have like almost black hair, like blackish brown hair. So I mixed up kind of an undercolor with some indigo and one of the dark browns to kind of create that like really dark brown that doesn't necessarily have a lot of red in it. Because when it comes to watercolor, when it comes to our earth tones, often our earth tones can be more reddish, and there's nothing wrong with that. But not everybody has a hair color like that. So it is kind of helpful to know how to mix those sort of hair colors, how to achieve those sort of hair colors from the paints that you do have available to you. I will also say, I have worked with the regular Paul Rubens of this line. So Paul Rubens has multiple lines, with their Yulon being, I believe, their highest grade that I'm aware of at this time. This is not their Yulon set. This is kind of like an unlabeled but artist quality set, if that makes sense. I really wish Paul Rubens as a company would do a better job differentiating between their different grades, because as a reviewer, that can be very confusing. And even when they send me watercolors, they don't tell me kind of where it fits into their ecosystem. So it makes it kind of hard to talk about and hard to recommend, like, oh, if you like this, then you'll like that, because they don't really differentiate very well. But I like this color selection. And this is a personal thing based on how the kind of subject matter that I like to paint. I paint very girly art. I mean, not only girls and women like my art. Lots of people like my art, but it's very soft and kind of feminine and very floral. So these colors really, and very bright and saturated. These colors really lend themselves to the kind of things I like to paint. And I like this color selection in the floral set better than their standard 24 color set. But that is just, you know, my personal opinion. So if you paint the kind of subject matter that I like to paint, you might prefer this color selection over the standard 24 color selection. And I do believe their 48 color set includes all these colors as well. However, sometimes having too many colors we get like decision paralysis, and it can be kind of overwhelming and make it harder to choose colors. So sometimes working with a more limited palette can be a little bit easier for us to find our own color voice. So, you know, you do have options. And I just wanted to kind of talk about this from like another viewpoint, because as I mentioned earlier, I did a bouquet with these. So I did a just straightforward, just florals with these. So I definitely wanted to test this out as somebody who paints a lot of people and a lot of tiny people. I wanted to kind of test this out and see how well it handled painting people. So to self-critique a little bit, I should have let more of the underwash show. I should not have painted the local colors as heavily as I end up doing. Sorry, I'm blocking it. I actually have to, so the way my camera is set up, it is between me and my painting. And so for me to see with my terrible eyesight, sometimes I do get in between the camera and I apologize for that. But anyway, I should have like let more of those underwashes show and done less over rendering with the local color. And I think part of what I was looking for was like that balance of contrast, but I could have just skipped over rendering the midtones so much and just gone in with the darkish shadow tones more, if that makes sense. Kind of like going back and doing a little bit reestablishment with the Grisaille for those shadow colors. And I think that would have accomplished what I was hoping for here. I will say I do like the final piece. I'm not saying it's ruined or anything, but as I mentioned earlier, I do like using, you know, when I'm editing these videos and doing voiceover, I do like using this as a chance to learn from it and to problem solve and to self-critique a little bit. And that's not me asking for critique, by the way. That's just me, you know, using this as an opportunity with like several months in between. I think 6 months passed between when I painted this and today. Might be even more than that. This 2025 and 2026 have been, I know they've been hard for everybody, so you guys can understand. But you know, it does provide a chance for me to like critique my work and to revisit what I've done. will point out, and this is actually a positive trait, even if I didn't handle it as well as I would have liked, that a lot of these colors do carry quite a bit of opacity to them, especially when we start getting into stronger formulations. So one of the nice things about Paul Rubens is that the colors don't just fall apart when you add water. There's a lot of brands where you just completely lose the color when you add water. Paul Rubens does have really nice dilute tints to their line. But they do also offer a lot of opacity, and the way these are formulated too, you can very quickly pick up quite a lot of opaque color because these activate so readily. And that's another reason why you would want to have like a ceramic mixing palette handy to help you with color control, because it can be a little too easy to pick up too much color. So, you know, I see that as a positive trait. It's one of the things that I really liked about the My Marie Blue, but it does require you to pay a little bit more attention than I might have been doing here. I might have been on autopilot of just like, let's fill in all the colors, doing it the same way we always do, Pinky. You know, so a few years ago, I did a field test and I was struggling with the opacity of the colors because the colors themselves were very opaque very early on, but when you watered them down, they lost saturation extremely quickly. So you really had a very limited window with which to kind of work with those colors. And I had a lot of people point out to me that I'm working with very opaque colors and that I am kind of stupid for, you know, struggling the way I was struggling. And I just want to point out that there are brands that can handle a wider range of opacity where you can water them down and still have those beautiful tints, but then also work with them more thickly and still have those colors. So it really, you know, if you're struggling to find a brand that works for you, it can be beneficial to watch reviews of people who handle the paints the same way you might want to handle the paints, because, you know, having those more pastel, those more muted, those more diluted colors is very beneficial for some artists, particularly illustrators and comic artists who do a lot of washes. And I do a lot of washes in what I do. So being able to kind of work back and forth with those colors and build up those colors is really important for me, rather than just having either a very dilute wash or a very opaque amount of dry over dry color, if that makes sense. Another little area of self-critique here. I totally could have left the greenery unpainted in this. I did not have to go in and paint that greenery. I chose to, and I feel like it really loses a lot of the vibrancy of this piece, because just having that shadow color as our shadow worked really well with the colors that I chose. And adding in the greenery does kind of flatten things out chromatically. Just like a little bit of self-critique, because I do paint this kind of subject matter frequently, and I happen to love flowers, and I happen to love painting pretty girls. So, you know, in the future, it might be something that I choose to maybe not paint all of the foliage next time. And again, that is not on Paul Ruben's. That is not on the colors that they included on this palette. It's more just self-critique for me. So just a little housekeeping note. This illustration was painted over several days, and this video has been time-lapsed about 8x. If I go any faster than that, it does start to become kind of unwatchable. So I know it is a longer video. I am, as you know, folks have requested shorter videos. I am working on that, I promise. But when it comes to watercolor illustrations like this, it can be, I'm still learning the kaiteki art skills of choosing like the best bits to share and then cutting out the bits that are not so interesting. But since this is also a field test, I wanted to kind of include the full start to finish of the process so that you guys could see how these paints handle, see how these paints activate from pans, reactivate dried from a ceramic palette, all that good important information that you need to know to be able to make an informed choice. And also, you know, as we're entering the time of people using generative AI to make fake process videos. Why would you do that? None of us make enough money doing this. Why would you kill Earth's resources to pretend to be an artist when you could just become an artist? Anyway, showing things from start to finish can be helpful. It can show people how things develop. It can show people how much time it takes, or how many layers it takes, or how much back and forth it takes, or how you make mistakes and how you solve mistakes. And it also just gives veracity to what you're doing, because it's not like Floral can replicate an illustration like this with all the steps from start to finish. So it is kind of like the stamp of the artist still here. And I do realize that the length does make it unwatchable for like folks who have a 30-minute lunch break and they just want to watch something and zone out. Believe me, friend, I get it. Sometimes I just have 7 minutes while I'm slurping down some food and I just want to like zone out and watch something silly. I get that. I like to think of my videos as like go to sleep videos or background company videos, because when I'm going to sleep, I like to pick a video that's about an hour long, because it takes me about 45 minutes to fall asleep. And that means I'm not like waking up as it's going off and I'm like, oh man, I need to find something else to go to sleep to. So if you know, don't feel bad if you use me as like background hangout company or go to sleep company. I am honored that you chose me as your company for that evening. right, so I'm going to recover the pros and cons. I did talk about these in the initial floral video, but I know not everybody's going to watch that video. So these are, let's start with the positive. These allow for you to mix some very vibrant colors. The color selection in this palette is very bright, so if you like bright, vibrant colors, this could be a good option for you. The color selection is also very easy to mix, at least for the kind of stuff I like to paint, and very easy to layer, which is really important to me. It's transparent enough that you can still see prior layers through, although I am going to re-ink this because, you know, sometimes when you're working with opaque colors, it can cause some muddiness as it layers over and obscures the line art. That's less of a problem if I'm working over a penciled piece rather than an inked piece, but I like doing inked pieces because then I can share the line arts over on Patreon. So, you know, it kind of depends on what you're doing and how much you care about that original line art still being visible. But I did kind of re-ink the original line art. And I really like the color selection in this palette. Oh, what I just did there was I splattered some clean water and then I'm picking it up with a paper towel. So I'm doing a lift technique so that I can add in like dewdrops. And I have tutorials where I, you know, explain that in more depth and do a better job showing it. So if you're curious about that, you should check out my channel. And then one possible con is that these are very easy to reactivate, literally what you see me doing here, to pick up those dewdrops, which is a trait some people might find frustrating, but I actually like the ability to rework colors and to lift out colors and to fix colors. And then I also don't think there's really, and look, this is a floral set for painting flowers. So take what I say with a grain of salt, but there isn't necessarily enough variety in the neutrals. The Van Dyke Brown and the Burn Brown are too similar, and we would benefit from a burnt sienna in this palette, which would make it easier to paint a wider variety of skin tones. But again, this is a specific palette. This is a floral palette. This is not a painting people palette. If Paul Rubens ever wants to work together on a painting people palette, though, I would be really excited to do that with them because, you know, I paint comics, so I paint a lot of people. But, you know, it isn't necessarily geared at painting people. And I will say that their Yulon palette with the 48 colors, which that review is also live, I think that palette's a really good fit for comic artists. And if you are a comic artist or you do illustrations with similar to what I do, and you're looking for a good watercolor palette, I recommend you check out that video next if you haven't watched it already. So I am re-inking this just to reestablish some contrast, and then I am going to just go in with some white gouache and add some highlights. I want to thank you guys. So we have like about 9 minutes left, so I guess it's a little too early to do the sign out. Sometimes it's a little hard to gauge time when you're doing an hour-plus long video, and that's on me. But I enjoyed painting this. If you want to color along with me, the line art has been shared over on my Patreon. I fund the work that I do here on YouTube because I don't make any money from YouTube. I make like maybe $40 a month for like, what, how many videos do I do? I do 4 videos a month. And all of those videos, I spend money on those videos. So I'm not really making money from YouTube, and that's not really why I do YouTube. I like connecting with other artists. I like making art. I like sharing art. I like talking about art supplies. Art supplies are one of my hyper focuses. And, you know, I continue to do YouTube as a platform to talk about art supplies and to share what I love with other people and to find a community. And as my Sjogren's has gotten worse, I just don't have the ability or the energy to sit down and do live streams the way I used to. I kind of have to work with my energy as I have energy. So that means I need to be more flexible with myself, and these kind of time-lapse videos do allow that to an extent. I can record myself painting a video when I have energy. I can edit it at a later time, and then I can voice over it at an even later time. So it kind of helps me continue to be a part of the world, even though my disability sometimes limits the ways that I can be part of the world, which I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to. But my point kind of was, I use Patreon, and I use money that I earn from teaching and money that I earn from selling art prints and greeting cards and stickers, whether it's on my online shop at natasoup.com/shop. By the way, Joseph is redoing the website. I am super excited. It's going to look so much better, and I'm going to update the shop. So keep an eye out for that. I will let you guys know when that's ready, but it's not ready yet. Anyway, I use the money from Patreon, teaching, and convention/shop sales to purchase most of the materials that I review. In this instance, Paul Rubens did send me the floral set, but the paper that I'm painting on, the ink that I'm using to re-ink this, the computer that I worked on, the blue painter's tape, all of those are consumables that, I pay for out of pocket. So if you like what I do and you can afford to do so, it always means a lot to me if you consider joining my Patreon. But, I know everybody's broke right now. I get it. So even if you just want to follow my Patreon for free, I have a weekly newsletter where I share behind the scenes, and I share works in progress, and I talk about conventions that I'm doing, or just, all kinds of art nerdy goodness over on Patreon. So, that's cool too, and that means a lot to me as well. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with me today. I kept this one kind of a lower key video because spoiler, I'm in my bedroom, which is where I often do voiceover work. And my Filet and Chicory, my pet rats, have their critter nation is in our bedroom. And we're trying to get them used to us. We're trying to socialize them. So, me sitting for an hour and just talking in a calming tone of voice is part of that socialization. So you guys were part of me socializing my pet rats. Thank you so much for joining me for that. So yeah, that's kind of what I was doing today. Just chilling out, narrating over a field test video, sharing my thoughts on these Paul Rubens paints, and, trying to get my little pet rattos more used to me and more socialized to me. And I appreciate you guys joining me for that. If you have any further questions about the Paul Rubens floral set, make sure you check out the original video. I'm going to have everything listed out for you guys down in the description below to make it super handy for y'all. And if you have any questions beyond that, feel free to let me know in the comments. If there's any watercolors that you'd like to see me talk about or any watercolory subject matter you'd like to see me cover, feel free to let me know about that in the comments as well. And since I talked about some of my pets today, I would love it if you would let me talk to me about your pets in the comments. That would make me really happy. We could call it the rat tax, even if you don't have rats, you are totally welcome to talk about your fur babies or your scaly babies or your finny babies or your feathery babies. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope this was helpful, useful, and informative. Hopefully I was able to answer and demonstrate any questions that you might have. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon with another art supply review or tutorial or art class or whatever. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you guys again soon. Bye, guys.